Tokyo, 1990. A businessman signs the deal of his life. He has just purchased a tiny slice of land in central Tokyo, smaller than a parking spot. The cost, enough to buy a private island in the Caribbean, but he doesn't care. Why? Because in Japan, in 1990, land always goes up, prices never fall. Everyone is rich, everyone is winning, and the rising sun will never set. Or so they thought, because beneath the neon lights and bullet trains, Japan was building something rotten. A bubble so big, it would crush the nation for decades. This is the story of how the miracle economy turned into the zombie economy. A country where people literally die at their desks, where the stock market still hasn't recovered after 30 years, and where an entire generation is disappearing before our eyes. Welcome to the dark side of Japan. The 1980s were Japan's golden decade. Factories roared, exports surged, and Japan seemed unstoppable. Sony Walkmans, Nintendo consoles, Toyota cars. If it had made in Japan on the box, the world wanted it. By 1989, the Tokyo Stock Exchange was the envy of the planet. 8 of the world's 10 largest companies were Japanese. Japan's GDP per capita was higher than America's. Even the Rockefeller Center in New York had been sold to Japanese investors. Hollywood panicked. In Blade Runner, the future was drenched in Japanese signs. In Die Hard, the villains were Japanese businessmen. Americans were terrified that the 21st century would belong to Tokyo, not Washington. And the Japanese, they were drunk on success. The Nikkei index soared past 38,000 points. Salaries climbed. Luxury brands flooded Tokyo's Ginza district. People bought Louis Vuitton handbags like they were buying groceries. But every party has a hangover. And Japan's was about to be the worst in history. In 1985, the Plaza Accord changed everything. The United States forced Japan to strengthen the yen. Great for American exporters. Disastrous for Japan. Suddenly, Japanese goods became more expensive overseas. Exports slowed. Growth wobbled, so the Bank of Japan panicked. They slashed interest rates, making credit dirt cheap. Cheaper than a vending machine coffee. The result, the biggest asset bubble the world had ever seen. Everyone borrowed money. Everyone speculated. Stock prices skyrocketed. Real estate prices went insane. At one point, people claimed that the land under Tokyo's Imperial Palace was worth more than all of California. Banks practically begged people to take loans. Credit officers weren't checking risk. They were shoving money out the door. Imagine Halloween candy, except the candy was poisoned, and the trick-or-treaters were multinational corporations. Then came the crash. In 1990, the Nikkei lost 38% of its value, wiping out $2 trillion. Real estate collapsed. People who thought they were sitting on gold mines discovered they had bought overpriced parking lots. And let's be honest, you can't eat a parking lot. Most countries, when faced with a banking crisis, rip the band-aid off. Bad banks fail, toxic debt is cleared, and the economy resets. Japan, they refused. Instead of letting insolvent banks collapse, the government propped them up. They allowed bad loans to sit on the books. Festering, banks that should have died became the walking dead. Zombie banks. And zombie banks created zombie companies. Firms that should have gone bankrupt stumbled along, sucking in loans, producing little, dragging the economy down. Japan had basically invented the zombie genre years before Hollywood ran it into the ground. Except these zombies didn't eat brains. They ate productivity. Previously, on the dark side of Japan, the miracle economy became a zombie economy. Banks that should have died were kept alive, creating companies that should have failed but stumbled along, dragging Japan into decades of stagnation. But the real darkness was just beginning. Interest rates were slashed to zero. Then below zero, public spending ballooned, but mostly on pointless projects. Bridges to nowhere, rural highways no one used, museums and towns with no visitors. Japan built so many unnecessary bridges and roads that they became a national joke. They poured concrete over mountains and filled in bays, all in the name of economic stimulus. Stimulus packages were announced every few months, but they were always offset by tax hikes or spending cuts elsewhere. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a giant hole in the bottom. The government would pump in money with one hand while draining it with the other. And still, the economy refused to grow. Deflation set in. Prices began falling, which sounds good until you realize it means your debt becomes more expensive over time. If you borrowed money to buy a house, but the house loses value every year, while your loan stays the same, you're basically paying more and more for less and less. By the late 1990s, wages were flat. Productivity was stagnant. The miracle had turned into a nightmare. And here's the cruel part. It never ended. 30 years later, Japan is still stuck. The stock market remains below its 1989 peak. Wages are basically frozen in time. Imagine working for 3 decades, only to discover your paycheck is worth less than it was in the 90s. That's not a career. That's slow torture. But Japan's real darkness wasn't just in the numbers, it was in the people. Let's talk about karoshi. The word means death from overwork, and it's not a metaphor. People in Japan literally die from working too much. Heart attacks at desks, strokes on trains, suicides after months of 100-hour weeks. The most famous case was an advertising executive who worked 159 hours of overtime in a single month before taking her own life. Her mother fought for years to get the government to recognize it as a work-related death. In most countries, your boss killing you is a joke. In Japan, it's a labor statistic with its own government office. The culture of endless work became a trap. Employees competed to stay latest at the office. Leaving before your boss was considered rude. Taking vacations was viewed as selfish. People slept under their desks rather than go home. Office lights burned all night, not because of urgent work, but because of social pressure. And even for those who survive, life isn't much easier. The population is shrinking. Birth rates have collapsed. By 2050, 1 in 3 Japanese will be over 65. That's not a retirement plan. That's a horror movie. Why is this happening? Long hours leave no time for family. Wages haven't moved in decades, making children unaffordable. Women are still pressured to choose between careers and children. And immigration. Forget it, Japan remains one of the most closed societies on Earth. Other countries offset aging populations by welcoming immigrants. Japan doubled down on isolation. The result is a shrinking workforce and a ballooning elderly population. It's like watching a bus drive toward a cliff in slow motion, and everyone politely ignores the cliff. And then there's loneliness. Japan has millions of hikikomori, mostly young men, who lock themselves in their rooms for years, sometimes decades. They avoid school, work, and even family. They live online, cut off from reality. Some estimates suggest over 1 million people are living this way. Marriage rates are plummeting, birth rates are collapsing. And the government's attempts to fix it, awkward, at best. They've offered subsidies for dating events, tax breaks for marriage. They've created government dating apps. Imagine filing your love life with the tax office. Nothing kills romance faster than an itemized deduction. Meanwhile, consumer spending stagnates because there are fewer families, fewer kids, fewer reasons to buy a bigger house or a new car. And without kids, who's going to buy the next generation of PlayStations? It would be easy to laugh at Japan as a unique case, a strange cultural quirk. But Japan isn't an outlier. It's a warning. Cheap credit, housing bubbles, corporate cronyism, refusal to let bad businesses fail. Sound familiar? Canada, Australia, even the United States. Japan just made the mistakes earlier. They believed debt was free. That land was the safest investment in the world. That the government could micromanage the economy forever. When the crash came, they doubled down on denial. And the result was 3 lost decades, flat wages, a stock market that never recovered, and a demographic time bomb ticking louder every year. It turns out that doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is on just the definition of insanity. It's the definition of Japanese economic policy. Japan remains a nation of incredible culture, resilience, and creativity. The trains run on time. The food is amazing. The vending machines are still world-class. But beneath the neon glow lies a darker truth, an economy that never healed, a culture of overwork, and a population on the edge of collapse. The land of the rising sun has been stuck in sunset for 30 years. And unless something changes, the darkness might last forever. But hey, at least you can buy a hot can of coffee from a vending machine at 3 in the morning. Priorities. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want more stories of economies that crash harder than my sleep schedule.